Hey everyone, the Find X2 Pro is Oppo's flashiest new flagship. It has a gorgeous screen, a beautiful and unique design, and even charging that can get you from 0 to 100 in a little over half an hour. Yet in this day and age, the final purchasing decision is often all about the cameras. Now, if you want to watch our full Find X2 Pro review, check out the link in the description down below. So how good is the triple camera setup of the Find X2 Pro? Can it compete with other phones in its price range, like the iPhone 11 Pro and the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra? I'm Angie for Cemera, and this is our camera review of the Find X2 Pro. Now, on the surface, this phone has a pretty standard looking setup. 3 cameras on the back, 1 on the front. However, it quickly becomes apparent that Oppo has outdone itself, and we're seeing some features for the very first time. The 48 megapixel main camera may sound familiar, but it actually uses an unusually large sensor made by Sony. Physically, it's almost as large as the 108 megapixel sensors used by some other manufacturers. The sensor also has dual ISO paths, which means photos shot in bright and low light have different processing and should mean better photos in both scenarios. Autofocus should also be improved in low light. See, the all-pixel omnidirectional autofocusing system uses 4 photodiodes per pixel instead of using 2 like traditional dual-pixel autofocus systems. The ultra-wide camera in the back also uses a 48 megapixel sensor, but keep in mind that it's not as large as the one on the main camera. The camera's field of view is not as large as traditional ultra-wides, but it has autofocusing, which allows for some really nice close-up shots. Finally, the 13 megapixel telephoto snapper with a periscope lens allows for 5 times optical zoom. It's stabilized and has an f3.0 aperture, but the sensor isn't as big as the telephotos on the S20 Ultra. During the day, photos shot with the main camera look pleasing. They have natural colors that are quite true to life and have a more laid-back processing style. There's also less contrast than what you'd get from most phones, but it's no deal breaker. Other than that, there's plenty of detail and no visible noise. Since the sensor is extra large, it means that you get natural-looking bokeh that's more pronounced than what you'd normally get from a phone sensor. The phone normally outputs 12 megapixel photos, but you can change the setting and have it output 48 megapixel snaps. While we did get more definition in specific patterns in our studio charts, there wasn't really an improvement in real-world photos. The ultra-wide camera had excellent distortion correction and had pretty much the same properties as the main cam in terms of colors, dynamic range, and contrast. With it, you can get even better detail than from the S20 Ultra. Still, the Samsung phone has wider coverage. That said, the ultra-wide on the Find has another trick up its sleeve. The autofocus allows for some extreme close-ups and exaggerated perspective shots. At 5 times zoom, the Find X2 Pro's telephoto camera delivered very detailed images. They had a bit of noise and colors are slightly livelier and warmer than the main cams. At 10 times zoom, you still get usable images that look nice at a fit-to-screen level, but there's a drop in pixel level detail. At 2 times zoom, the phone crops in from the main cam without any extra data from the telephoto. So while there's decent performance, some textures don't hold up well to pixel level examination. We had the Galaxy S20 Ultra around, so we were curious to see how the Find X2 Pro stacked up next to it. At 1 times zoom, the Galaxy phone produced much more saturated images that stuck out. The Find, on the other hand, had more natural colors. At their native zoom levels, details are comparable. At 10 times zoom, both phones have pretty much the same level of fine detail, but the Find has more noise than its competition. If you like to shoot portraits, the Find X2 Pro will give you 2 magnifications you can choose from, either 1 times zoom or 2 times zoom. Both are captured by the main cam, so the more zoomed-in version has less detail. Indoors, the phone will struggle to produce sharp portrait images, and messy hairstyles against contrasting backgrounds might trip up the edge detection. The background bokeh looked natural and you can adjust it, though the default 60% settings seem to work okay. When the light gets low, the Find X2 Pro does some sort of night mode processing, even though it's not using a dedicated mode. As a result, low-light images have excellent dynamic range with good highlights and well-developed shadows, which is unusual for most phones. This comes at a cost though, and you'll find that textures appear plasticky as the algorithm wipes out fine textures. Colors are preserved, but are cooler than the output of some competitors, which makes pictures look a little dull at times. There is a night mode available, but it takes longer to capture images and produces slightly different results. Shadows are further lifted and highlights are kept mostly in check, which makes the photos look brighter. Detail isn't any worse, but with this phone, the resolve detail in low light is not great to begin with. Unfortunately, we couldn't see the supposed benefits of the dual ISO system. The ultra-wide camera has a similar situation in low light conditions, but there's even less of a difference between photo mode and night mode. We like the wide dynamic range and tonal development, but the shots were cooler and softer than we'd prefer. So what happens if you want a more zoomed in photo? Well, things aren't great. 2x shots barely look good on the screen of the phone, but they're digitally zoomed in and upscaled, so we didn't expect much from them in the first place. Shots with 5x zoom are more of a hit or miss. There's only a 30% chance the phone will use the actual telephoto camera. If it doesn't, things look pretty bad. If it does use the periscope, you might even get a usable shot. Night mode works on the telephoto camera too, but for some reason the phone might decide to use the main cam instead of the telephoto if you switch camera modes. We decided to do another comparison with the Galaxy S20 Ultra, but this time at night instead of during the day, and the results were very different. At 1x magnification, you can already see a huge difference in detail levels and color reproduction. The Find has fewer details, less noise, and lower saturation than its competition. So, to no one's surprise, at 2x zoom, again, the Find X2 has more plasticky textures and lower levels of detail, while the Samsung has more noise. At 2x zoom and night mode both look brighter, though the Galaxy phone still has better detail. Now, at their native zoom levels without night mode, the Samsung blows the Find X2 Pro out of the water. It has better colors and better details by far, although it has a lot of noise. The Find X2 Pro trails behind with a watercolor look and poor detail reproduction. At native zoom levels with night mode turned on, Samsung remains king. The Find X2 Pro has better performance than before, and it looks more like a photo and less of a sketch, but it's still not great. When it comes to video, the Find X2 Pro can record videos at up to 4K at 60 FPS. Stabilization is available in all modes, but you can't turn it off. There are 2 dedicated stabilization modes, an Ultra Steady one and an Ultra Steady Pro. They lock the resolution and frame rate at Full HD at 60 FPS. We didn't find them to be better than the regular stabilization, but that's because the regular one was actually great to begin with. On the main camera, 4K footage has good levels of detail, though not quite as high as what you'd see on the Galaxy S20 Ultra. There's also quite a difference in color rendition between 30 FPS and 60 FPS. The higher frame rates come with a red color cast, though we actually like this color output better than the normal one. If you zoom in 2x, you'll get similar video quality. In other words, good, but not great. Otherwise, the general image properties are more or less the same. At 5x zoom, you'll get some substantial differences. 4K at 60 FPS comes out of the main camera, so footage looks bad, and you should just straight up avoid it. 4K at 30 FPS had good pixel level detail, though it was a bit noisy. Full HD in both 30 and 60 frames per second were okay, though the 60 FPS mode had a drop in sharpness. We also decided to see what would happen if you shoot at 10x zoom. It can be good enough if you can stabilize the phone properly, but there was a lot of wind when we were shooting, so it's usable, but not great. The ultra-wide camera captures some good 4K video at 30 FPS, though you should know there's no 60 FPS option here. Despite some pretty aggressive sharpening, it still produced likable footage. Photos from the selfie camera come out with tons of detail if there's enough light. You'll still see some noise, and the dynamic range is on the narrow side, but the HDR mode handles it quite well. That is, until you switch to portrait mode. There, HDR is unavailable. You should expect blown highlights and high contrast scenes. Still, the phone exposes your face correctly, and the bokeh is natural, while the subject detection works pretty well. The Find X2 Pro offers plenty in terms of its cameras, and it even pioneered a few things that we hadn't seen before, but we gotta admit that it doesn't check all the boxes for us. We saw great performance across all 3 cameras during the day, matching and even sometimes beating the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra. But when it comes to videography and low-light performance, things weren't as good. In Oppo's own portfolio, the Find X2 Pro is a great stride ahead, and you definitely won't be disappointed if you have this phone in your pocket and you want to take a picture. But if you're looking for the best of the best and the ultimate camera phone, then perhaps this one isn't it. Now, listen, cameras are very important when it comes to choosing a phone, but they're not the only thing that makes a good device. So if you want the full picture of what the Find X2 Pro can offer you, then you should check out our full review. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button down below, subscribe at the bell icon, and more importantly, stay home and stay safe. See you guys next time.